The curse of the tortured writer is a theme that seems to repeat throughout history. From Hemingway to Thompson to Plath, it stands to reason that the most brilliant minds often house the darkest demons. Tonight, we're sharing a tale of one such soul whose time with us was both poetic and fleeting, leaving us to question just what happened to Barbara Follett. I'm DreyOfTheDead, and it's time to feed your head. Barbara Follett was born in Hanover, New Hampshire in 1914. She was homeschooled by her parents, both writers, and given the freedom to pursue anything she wanted. By age 5, Barbara was writing poetry about nature and had taught herself to use a typewriter. By age 7, she'd created her own language, and a year later began writing The Adventures of Yppership. The story followed a young girl who runs away from home to live among her animal friends. She travels the woods, the sea, and finally the mountains before abandoning her body to become a spirit of nature. Though Barbara's manuscript was lost in a house fire, she rewrote the story, publishing it at the age of 12 under the title The House Without Windows. The book became a bestseller, and Barbara was hailed as a child prodigy. By 13, Barbara fell in love with the sea and left her parents to set sail on a ship bound for Nova Scotia. She returned a few months later with the manuscript to her second book, The Voyage of Norman D., which received critical acclaim. It was during this time that her father left her mother for another woman. Devastated, Follett wrote, "My dreams are going through their death flurries. They are dying before the steel javelins and arrows of a world of time and money." For the next few years, she accompanied her mother across the West Indies, the South Pacific, and finally, Los Angeles. There, she was placed in the care of a family friend to provide her some stability and enrolled at the Pasadena Junior College. But Barbara felt anything but stable and ran away to San Francisco. When detectives located her, she attempted to throw herself out her hotel window, but was apprehended and returned to Los Angeles. Not long after, she and her mother moved to Washington, D.C., and eventually New York. At the age of 16, Barbara's family fell on hard times in the midst of the Great Depression, and though she wrote several more books, she was no longer receiving the favor of publishers. It seems times would only get darker for Barbara Follett. While camping with friends at the age of 18, Follett met Nickerson Rogers, and the two fell in love. The couple spent the summer of 1932 camping in Holderness, New Hampshire. They went on to explore the Appalachian Trail, Spain, the Swiss Alps, and finally Massachusetts, where they were wed. Though they continued to travel, the mountains of Holderness held a special place in Barbara's heart, a place she would return to again and again. By 1937, she began expressing concern for her marriage to friends and family. Just 2 years later, Rogers asked for a divorce. It seemed he'd met someone else. Barbara dropped everything in order to save her marriage. But between the reality of this betrayal and reliving her parents' failed marriage, she sank into a deep depression, which she attempted to numb with sleeping pills. On November 4th, 1939, she wrote, "On the surface, things are terribly, terribly calm and wrong, just as wrong as they can be. I am trying. We're both trying. I still think there's a chance that the outcome will be a happy one, but I would have to think that anyway in order to live. So you can draw any conclusions you like from that." The issue came to a head on December 7th of 1939. After a fight with her husband, Barbara grabbed $30 and a notebook and slipped out of the house. She was never seen again. It was not until 2 weeks later that Rogers reported Follett's disappearance, claiming he was awaiting her return. 5 months later, he finally requested a publicized missing persons bulletin, which listed her as Barbara Rogers and went completely unnoticed by the media until years later. Had Follett fled to escape her troubles, or was Rogers hiding a dark secret? Just a few years earlier in Plymouth, a young mother, Elsie Whitmore, took a walk after dinner to settle her stomach. Elsie was pregnant with her second child, and though it was not unusual for her to step out, this time she never returned. The search commenced for Elsie, who was described as highly esteemed but slightly depressed on account of this unexpected pregnancy. Search dogs tracked her scent to the end of the street and then lost the trail, leading some to assume that she had accepted a ride. A truck driver passing through Hill, New Hampshire, reported picking up a hitchhiker matching Elsie's description, coincidentally the day after she went missing. She was carrying a loaf of bread, he said, and was headed for New York. She'd been walking all night. Investigators visited the driver's drop-off point, an orphanage in Franklin, where they learned that the hitchhiker in question had spent the entire day sitting at a local landmark. But when some of the orphans were shown Elsie's photo, they could not identify her. Authorities later announced that the hitchhiker had not been Elsie, but on what basis remains unknown. Elsie's case, just as Barbara's, had turned cold. On Thanksgiving Day, 1948, in the mountains of Holderness, hunter Harold Huckins came upon the pine-covered remains of what he thought was an animal. But then he noticed the shoes. A pair of moccasin-style sport Oxfords similar to the ones Elsie wore. In addition to the remains were a pocketbook, purse, empty medicine bottle, metal flask, straw belt, part of a duffel bag, a fragment of a wool overcoat, a compact with a bird emblem, and a pair of horn-rimmed glasses. Elsie's family could not identify most of these items. According to them, Elsie didn't wear glasses. Early forensic science determined that the remains were at the scene for over 8 years. Bone length results, though often inaccurate at this time, suggested a woman 62 to 63 inches in height. The recovered moccasins measured in at a size 7, though Elsie was a size 5, a discrepancy chalked up to weathering. Traces of unidentified barbiturate lined the empty medicine bottle, leading specialists to conclude the cause of death to be self-inflicted. The remains were ultimately concluded to be Elsie's, and the case was closed. Elsie's family refuted these results, citing multiple discrepancies. The family never received the remains for burial, nor the death certificate. In fact, the remains have since disappeared. Both women were 25. Barbara was 67 inches in height, intimately familiar with the Holderness area, and often wore horn-rimmed glasses. If you enjoyed this strange but true tale, be sure to subscribe and check out previous episodes. I put out new videos every other Friday. If you're a fan of blooper reels or behind-the-scenes footage, consider joining my Patreon. These are just some of the patrons who make these videos possible. Whatever you may or may not celebrate during this time of the year, please have a safe and happy holiday season. It seems this is the last time I'll be saying this for this year. So, from the very bottom of my heart, thank you so much for being here. Be well and stay strange.